Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm Lora Rolling and this is part 3 of the Christmas tree ornament tutorial. This is the Christmas tree ornament that we are making. It is so cute with all the little Christmas trees all the way around, little candy canes at the bottom. And today we're going to be making the triangle called the snow. If you haven't done parts 1 and 2 yet, that's okay. You can do these out of order. I'll have those 2 videos listed down below in the description. So once you're finished with this one, then you can go back and watch those. We just have a few materials to get ready. So let's get them listed and then we can get started. Let's go. So the beads that we're going to be using in today's video are all Miyuki Delicas. I have white pearl, opaque carnation, and opaque yellow AB. Just to make it simple, I'm going to call this white, pink, and yellow. We're also going to need some beading thread and a beading needle. I like to use the Eslon Fire in the color Crystal, and I like 4-pound thread. You can also use 6-pound thread if that's what you have. And then I also like to use a size 10 beading needle. If you only have a size 12, that will work too. For implements, I like to use my long nose pliers to hold on to my thread, and I cut my thread with my scissors. In the beginning, I'm going to show you how to use the fire method to end the tail. So we'll do that in today's video. And then last but not least, we are going to need a 2.36 inch plastic crafting ornament. I buy these in the 12 pack at my local hobby store. You can also find them sold individually in my Etsy shop. And we're not going to use it in today's video, but to complete the entire project, if you do videos 1 through 5, then you'll see that we're using this one in the 5th part of this series. So you want to get your hands on one of these. Alrighty, so that's all we need for today's project. So let's thread our needle with 2 feet of thread and then we can get started. So I've threaded my needle and now it's time to start picking up beads. Let's pick up 3 white beads. And then we're going to take those beads and we're going to pull them down to the bottom of our thread, leaving about a 6-inch tail. Then I'm going to tie a square knot. So cross over and then pull the tail through. Now cross over again on the top and pull the tail through again. So now you have what looks like a little snowman. I like to put my 2 fingers in the bottom loop where the beads are, and then I can pull the top loop until it becomes a knot. Now we have our little tail right here. So I'm not going to touch it to the flame, but I'm going to get it really, really close, and it's going to melt the tip of the tail, which turns the tip into a little teeny bead, just like that. Now I'm going to put my fingers back in that loop where the beads are, and I'm going to pull on the long part of the thread, twisting the loop until that little bead on the very tip of the tail touches or meets that long piece of the thread. So now we have what looks like this. I'm going to take my thumbnail and just pull that little knot down to the beads. And we're going to try to get the beads to make a little triangle, just like that. And now I'm going to take, you can see that the knot is kind of in the center of those two beads. I'm going to tug it to one side, so it looks like the string is coming out of this bead. And that completes row number 1. Let's start row number 2 by adding 2 white beads. It looks like we're coming out of this bead, so we're going to sew through the next bead. Then I'm going to see if I can get those beads to cooperate by sitting right on top of their buddies. Just like that. Now I'm going to pick up 2 more white beads. Coming out of this bead, let's sew through the next bead. And once again, try to get those beads to sit right on top of their buddies. Just like that. Let's pick up 2 more white beads. And we're coming out of this bead right here. Let's sew through the next bead. And we'll also sew through the bead right below that one. So we're sewing through 2 beads. And when we sew through 2 beads, what we're doing is we're stepping up and putting our thread in position to start the 3rd row. So we've completed 2 rows now. Let's start row number 3 with 2 pink beads. So we're coming out of this bead. Let's sew through the next. Let's pick up 1 white bead. And we're coming out of this white bead right here. Let's skip the one that's kind of sitting downwards, and we'll sew through the one that's poking up. We're going to call that poking up bead our up bead. Let's pick up 2 pink beads. And we're coming out of this bead right here. Let's sew through the next bead. I like to turn my work in my hand as I go. It just makes it so much easier to sew. Let's pick up 1 white bead. Skipping the down bead, we're going to sew through the up bead. Turn. Let's pick up 2 pink beads and sew through the next. And our last bead in this row is 1 white bead. Skipping the down bead, we're going to sew through the up and sew through the bead right below it. So we're sewing through 2 beads, which means we're stepping up, and now we can start row number 4. Let's start row 4 with 2 pink beads. We're coming out of this bead, we'll sew through the next. Let's add another pink bead, 1, and sew through the up bead. Let's pick up 1 pink bead and sew through the up. 2 pink beads, sew through the next. 1 pink bead, sew through the up. 1 pink bead, sew through the up. 2 pink beads, sew through the next. 1 pink, sew through the up, and 1 pink, sew through the up bead and the bead below it. That completes row number 4. Let's start row number 5. 2 pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, 2 pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, 2 pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, and 1 pink. Sewing through 2 beads. And now we get to start row number 6. Let's start with 1 white and 1 pink. One pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, 1 white and 1 pink. One pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, 1 white and 1 pink. One pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, 1 pink. Sewing through 2 beads. That completes row 6. Let's start row 7 with 1 white and 1 pink. One pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, 1 white and 1 pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, at the corner, let's put 1 white and 1 pink. One pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, and 1 pink. Sewing through 2 beads, and now we get to start row number 8. Let's start with 2 pink beads, our triangle starting to look good, 1 pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, 1 white, 1 pink, 1 white, 1 at the corner, let's pick up 2 pink beads, 1 pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, 1 white, 1 pink, 1 white, 2 pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, 1 white, 1 pink, 1 white. Sewing through 2 beads, and now we can start row number 9. Let's start with 2 pink beads, 1 pink, 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 2 white beads, 1 pink, 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 2 pink beads, 1 pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, 1 pink, 1 pink. Sewing through 2 beads, finishing that row. Let's start row 10 with 2 pink beads, 1 pink, 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 2 white, 1 pink, 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 boy, there's a lot of pink beads in this one. Oops. At the corner, let's put 2 pink beads. One pink. 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 And one pink. Sewing through 2 beads. And now we're starting row 11 with 2 pink beads. One pink. 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 One white. Two white beads. One white. One pink. 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 Two pink beads. One pink. 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 And one pink. sewing through 2 beads. And now we're ready to start row number 12. Let's start with 2 pink beads. One pink, one pink, one pink, one pink, one white, one pink, one pink, one pink, one white, one white, two white, one white, one white, one pink, one pink, one pink, one white, one pink, one pink, one pink, one pink, two pink beads, one pink, 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 and one pink. Let's sew through 2 beads, and that completes our 12 rows. Our triangle is looking amazing. Now, if this is the first triangle that you've made with me, you'll see that we have connection beads. We call them connection rows. And some triangles that we make to create this entire project are going to have connection rows on 1 or 2 of the edges, and then others are not. This triangle needs no connection beads on this side. It does need connection beads on this side, and it needs no connection beads on this side. So the first thing we're going to do is cap our corner though. So we're going to cap this corner and make it into a little point by adding one pink bead. Then I'm going to, because I have a little dent on this side, I'm going to turn my triangle over, and without picking up any beads, I'm going to start sewing up each row. I like to catch the beads at the end where there's this little space in this quadrant. It just is easier for me to sew through these end beads, but you can actually sew up any beads that you want until we get to this bead right here. Okay, so you can actually pick any old bead that you want. Just make sure that you're going through at least one bead in each row so that your thread does not show at all while you're sewing through these beads. You don't want to skip any rows. And while we're sewing through these beads and working our way up to the top, I'm going to ask you for the emoji of the day. The emoji of the day is a snowflake. So go ahead and put a snowflake in the comments before you forget. Don't forget, put a snowflake in the comments, and or you can just write snowflake if you don't have emojis or you don't like to make emojis. And yeah, that lets me know that you got this far in the video, and I love that we're beading together. So let's celebrate that by adding our emoji of the day. So fun. Okay, we're working our way up, getting up to the top. And we've hidden our thread. We don't see any thread at all. And we are now at this top corner. So we're going to cap this corner with one white bead, turning that corner into a little point. And now we're going to add our connection beads right here. So let's start with one white, one white, one pink, one pink, one pink, one white, one pink, one pink, one pink, one pink, and one yellow. I know you were wondering, when are we going to use yellow? Well, we get one little teeny yellow right here in the corner. Alrighty, so now we are at our third corner. Let's cap it with one pink bead. And then let's secure it by sewing up 6 beads or 6 rows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And now we're going to do what I call a zigzag. We're coming out of the top of this bead that's over to the left in this row. We're going to sew down the bead right next to it. And then we're going to sew up the bead next to that one. That zigzag strengthens this bead that we just put on. We don't want that bead to get loose. So let's now sew up 2 more rows or 2 more beads. And then let's do that zigzag again. We're coming out of the top of this bead. Let's sew down the bead right next to it, and then up the bead right next to that one, and then sew up 2 beads, the one above that one and the one above that one. Now I feel very secure that we're very confident that this bead right here is not going to get loose. So let's cut our thread by holding our thread with our long nose pliers and then taking our scissors and getting as close to the bead as possible and cutting the thread off. Now we have completed our triangle. We only need 5 in this series, so let's do this 4 more times and I will see you in a second. That was so much fun. Thank you so much for being here with me today and beading along with me. Remember to like and subscribe and hit that bell button so you're notified when the next video comes out. I can't wait to see you there. Thanks for watching.